Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric, a continuing series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project. We're going to be doing a fun revisit today because it's been a long time since I looked at the Sharp X68000 Core, and it was updated since I did this setup guide and review on the work in progress core. A lot of you have been asking me to revisit it, so that's what we're doing today. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, you got a Patreon link down below as well. But I absolutely love the Sharp X68000. It's got a massive library of amazing games, and Strider here is one of them. These are basically near to arcade perfect ports, and I know we already have Strider on CPS from Hotego, but it's so much fun to have the Sharp 68000 on MiSTer. Now be aware this core is not finished, it is not complete, so you will see some games with a little bit of graphical glitching here and there, and some games will just refuse to boot, but it's definitely a better performance core than the last time I took a look at it, and if you do want a setup guide, I'll leave you a link down below, because it is still relevant the last time I took a look at this core. But this was such an amazing computer back in the day. This is a powerhouse that was basically designed mostly as a productivity machine, but somehow became a massive gaming success. It is really known for its gaming prowess. And if you want to buy one today, it is an absolute metric crap ton of money to obtain a Sharp X68000. We're talking in the thousands of dollars, and it's probably still going to need some repairs and modifications from there. So even having a work in progress X68000 core for MiSTer is amazing. And it is the #1 core I hope to see finished sometime in 2024, because for as much as it does, it definitely could still use an improvement here and there. That's not a knock on the work. A lot of talented people have gone and put a lot of work into this core, but it would just be fun to see it finished. But again, if you want to play this today, you 100% can, and these are all games I never checked out the first time around. Now moving on to Daimakimura, another awesome Capcom arcade game that has a perfect port on the Sharp X68000. This is another game, in my experience, having played through it, it is just working like you would expect it to. The only problem with this game is the brutal difficulty. Definitely be prepared to have to restart this over and over again, because Capcom developers pulled no punches when it came to the difficulty factor in this game. But it's so amazing to see this running on the MiSTer, even if the core has been updated in a while. This is an absolute classic of Capcom arcade history, and here on the Sharp X68000 core, it is a game that you can just 100% pick up and play. And that's what I found with the updated core, even though it was updated a long time ago. Some games I tested last time that wouldn't work whatsoever now do work, and I'm not surprised that all of you have been asking for a revisit of the X68000 core. It is just one of those special computers that everyone knows about, everyone wants, but so few people actually get. The only thing about this game, like I said earlier, is it is out to steal your quarters. Obviously this isn't the arcade core, this is the Sharp X68000, so you don't have quarters per se, but if you've never played this game before, if you only casually tried it out, be prepared to die a lot. This does not give you any assists whatsoever. It is hard from start to finish, but it is such an incredible game, and if there's anything wrong with it running on the current X68000 core, I would never be able to tell. This just looks, feels, and plays like the Daimakimura I know and love, and if you've never played it, definitely check it out, and that skull just missed me there. Now that's the thing about this game, it's all risk versus reward, and if you take a look in the background when that lightning goes off, you do see that background layer appearing correctly. I've seen that in other X68000 emulators have some issues, but here on the current MiSTer core, it looks good. Only thing that didn't look good was that death that I took there, and the thing about this game is once you die once, you start to just die over and over again. It is cruel, it is mean, it wants to kill you, but it can kill you on the X68000 core on MiSTer, and we should all be super happy about that. Now moving on to another game I never captured in the original core setup guide, this is Choren Sha 68K. This is actually a fan game, it's a vertical shmup, and it does things with the hardware that are absolutely mind-blowing. This would look incredible if it was for a 32-bit system, but it is here on the Sharp X68000. If you're wondering why it called it that, that's because it uses a Motorola 68000 processor. This game is intense, it's action-packed, it is very twitchy and fast, and you need responsive controls to be able to succeed, which the core definitely has. And this game has an awesome soundtrack. Hear the sound quality for a second and I'll be right back. Sounds absolutely spectacular. That's the thing about the current core. I've never had any issues with the sound. Sure, there might be a graphical glitch here and there, and some games do not work whatsoever, but the games that work, the sound just seems perfect, and the controls are matched right alongside of it. The only time I take a death in this game is when I make a mistake. There's no lag in the control input. It just seems to play like it would on original hardware. That's really all you can ask out of something like this. But this game is just a visual feast, and it's one that I never checked out on the core up until I did this video. So thanks everyone for asking me to go and retest 68000 and talk about it again. Hopefully maybe this gets a core release sometime soon. Every time I do a video on an update, it seems like it becomes defunct almost a week later. So let's hope in this respect we see the same thing. But this game is an absolute blast. Definitely check it out on the core if you haven't. Now, one thing the Sharp X68000 could do that not many people seem to be aware of is it could draw rudimentary polygons on screen with that Motorola 68000 processor. So we're going to take a look at Geograph Seal, one of the few games on the console that does draw polygons, and this is basically the precursor to Jumping Flash on the PlayStation 1. Now be aware that the frame rate in this game is not good to modern standards, but that is because this Sharp X68000 is drawing 3D on screen, and it definitely was not set up to do something like that. But as we get into the game, this plays exactly like it should. I saw no issues whatsoever, and this is just so wild to see. A 3D game on a computer that was released in the late 80s that uses basically a derivative of the same processor in the Sega Genesis. The Sharp X68000 could do so many unique and different things, and this was another game that I definitely wanted to retest when I took a look at the core and what had been changing since I last talked about it. It's just so much fun to see this happen in real time. All of these polygons on screen at once. Obviously they're flat shaded, there is no texturing whatsoever, and while the frame rate might not be spectacular, it is better than you would expect it to be for a computer that was this old. And in the current core, it is just another game that 100% seems to work exactly as you would expect it to. And that's the impressive thing about this core. Even though it hasn't been updated in a while, it does play a lot of games very effectively, and I do hope to see one day another update that brings us even more titles that we can test and check out. But Geograph Seal is one of those super unique games on the Sharp X68000. It's just not something that you would expect to see from this system. Polygons on screen all at once with a decent frame rate. It does seem to be a little bit like magic that this is all holding together, but it does hold together on real hardware, and it also holds together on the current core. And it's just one game that you can definitely check out. But if you want to see another version of this video, leave me a comment down below and tell me what games you want to see, because I'm in a real Sharp X68000 mood, and I'm kind of entertaining a series on this hardware for next spring or summer, so tell me down below if you would be interested. The only thing about this game is that it does have some steep difficulty, and if you die at the boss, you're going to have to do the entire level over again. Now onto a game that I tested that just didn't work whatsoever is Fatal Fury Special. You can get into the game. You'll see here we have the boot screen, and I'm using all HDF files for this. I find it to be the easiest and most successful, but you will see that this is using some sort of graphical mode that is either not currently in the core or is not functioning as it would expect to be. You do get the background layer, that looks good, you get the sprites coming in, but there is just gigantic corruption all over it. But it's actually a really interesting thing just to look at, so you see what could go wrong. You get to a black screen, and then the Fatal Fury Special title is just completely mangled, but in such a pretty way, it's really fun to see. And speaking of pretty games, we have Daytona Twin Bee here, and it's got some of the best use of pastel of any game I think Konami ever made, and Konami really loved using some of those pastel colors all over the place. It looks good in the title sequence, and when we get into the game, it looks spectacular as well. But this game has such a good soundtrack. It's one of the best as far as a shmup that Konami ever made is concerned. So go ahead and listen for like 35 seconds. I'll come back and show you more gameplay and show you where games that work start to see a little bit of graphical glitching when it comes to priority layers. But enjoy! Again, the sound in this core is spectacular. I never hear anything that doesn't seem to work perfectly. And as we get through the first level here, everything still looks absolutely incredible. But the Sharp X68000 was a 2D powerhouse, and you can see the different 2D layers as they scroll by. They are running in parallax. What's in the foreground is moving faster than the layer in the background, so you do get that pseudo depth of field just with the parallax scrolling, and it does really effectively show you kind of into the screen. But the boss here, again, just such a massive sprite, and this was something that the Sharp X68000 could do that not a lot of other hardware could do at the time. You're going to see a little band of pixels behind the boss's sprite. That is not there in real hardware, but it is a really tiny minor thing that doesn't affect the gameplay whatsoever. Now as we get into the second stage, you're going to see a little bit more of that priority issue coming up. We have these scrolling clouds, everything seems to look okay, but in some games the sprite versus the background layer start to do something strange. They move at a different cadence, or you can get behind them, because you're going to see here the clouds are going to stop scrolling and everything underneath them still does, giving you that sense that you're in the clouds and the ground is moving underneath you. But very shortly you're going to see the clouds start to redraw themselves up the screen right now. It is just not drawing the sprite correctly, but honestly it so little affects the actual gameplay that I'm willing to overlook this to get some Twin Bee in. It really is that much fun, but I hope one day if we do see an updated core, this is one of the first things that'll be fixed so I can show it to you guys. Now speaking of other games that are also awesome and also have that sort of priority layer issue, River City Ransom right here, you can walk behind some assets in the screen. Again, it does not affect the gameplay whatsoever, but if you do start seeing things like that, don't be surprised, it is just what the current core does. But it doesn't seem to be that big of a deal, honestly, and being able to play the Sharp X68000 on MiSTer is worth the price of admission alone, and since the cores are free, that is a zero-sum cost. And this is just such a fun game. Obviously it's in Japanese, so it's going to be a little bit of a struggle to understand everything going on, but it's just a classic funny beat 'em up that really does work well on the core, because outside of that little bit of being able to walk into the background graphics, I haven't found anything in this game that leads me to believe that there's any other problems whatsoever. This core really feels like it's like 90-95% done and just needs a few bug fixes to really get over the finish line, but honestly that's just a presumption. It could be something completely different. And the last game I'm going to show you guys is Night Arms. This has a pseudo sprite scaling effect to it. It seems like the game runs in full 3D, but it's just playing around with the sprite and background layer trickery, and while the frame rate doesn't seem to run as fast as you would like it to, it is still an awesome game and it's working so well on the current core. And it seems like developers back in the day didn't really care so much about the frame rate as if they could show you something that was very graphically complex. You see that moon in the background, the skybox, everything rotates around itself, and it just 100% works on the current core. Even though this core is not done, it never ceases to impress me just how good it is, and that sound quality is top notch. So one last sound sample before we end the video. This soundtrack is awesome. I'll be back and tell you more about the X68000. Awesome soundtrack, awesome gameplay, and you'll see here we get to this door and we're basically going to fade into the background, and it now becomes a free range of motion 2D horizontal shmup. You can move back and forth. It is just such a strange game. It's such a unique feature and it really does work well on the core. It's definitely a game that if you've never played before, you should check it out. I'm not saying it's a total hidden gem status, but it is very intriguing and interesting, and it is something that is worth taking a look at. And that's the best part about the Sharp X68000 Core. You can play around with it today and maybe discover a new game you love. This is definitely one that's up there on the list for me that I do want to see a little bit more into the game, but it is definitely difficult like most of the Sharp X68000 games are, so it's probably going to take me some hours in there until I can see the credits scroll, but it is definitely worth your time in checking out. But that's the current situation with the Sharp X68000 Core. It's definitely not finished, but there have been improvements since I covered this over a year ago, and I hope one day to see more improvements in a finished core because it is so much fun as a platform. And that's the great thing about the current core. It might not be done, but I jumped right back in, started playing games, and started having fun. And that's the most important thing for a core or for MiSTer. If it compels you to want to keep playing more, you know it's doing a great job. Short of that, tell me down below if you want to see any core revisits on things that aren't finished or even finished, and maybe I'll make them in the future. But I'm going to go play more Sharp X68000. Bye bye.